Welcome back, everybody. You know what I find funny to this day? It doesn't matter how long I've been doing this or how many pieces I've done. It's always the little pieces that you think, oh, this will be a quick flip, that ends up taking forever. I've been working on this piece for like a week and a half. Not 8 to 10 hours a day or anything, but still, I picked this up from Facebook Marketplace almost exactly a year ago. I was so intrigued by the shape of it, I'd never seen anything quite like it. I paid a little bit more for it than I wanted to. I did offer her a bit less than she was asking, and she took it. I mean, it's in pretty rough shape. But there was just something about this piece. Clearly looking at it, you can see that there's a fair bit of finish damage. There's some structural stuff, a lot of staining and scratches on the top. I knew it would take work, but it's such a small piece that I figured I could whip this up in maybe 3 days. That did not happen. Stay tuned. My name is Angie and I refinish furniture. Sometimes I paint and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. Okay, so fair warning, a lot of this video is going to be repair work. Starting with this drawer, which you can see is in absolutely terrible shape. It's literally falling apart. I couldn't even get it inside the desk anymore because it's just falling apart at every joint pretty much. This drawer pull is the heaviest thing I have ever seen. It's even bent both of the machine screws, so I'm not sure if I want to reuse this or not. I don't even like it, but it is original to the piece, so we'll see. This thing is dangerous. Anywho, we're gonna get to taking the drawer apart. Now, as lovely as this piece is or is going to be, and I can tell it's going to be nice in the end, or at least I hope, it's not constructed the best. Everything's put together with very elementary joinery, with the exception of the legs, but these drawer face and part of the lower section, which you'll see later, they're just individual blocks of wood glued together and held together with this spline on the top that's only about 1 inch thick. So that's kind of interesting. The sides of the drawers are basically just glued and nailed in. Very, very basic. As you can see, the drawer bottom is pretty rough. All of the separate veneers have come loose, and I find it a bit of a flimsy drawer anyway. It's only about 1/8 of an inch thick, so I'll be replacing that. I want something a little bit beefier. To do that, it means I'm going to have to modify the drawer pieces a bit, but you'll see that a little bit later on. Even the drawer guide is a mess. You can see it literally just snapped in half. I'm going to try to salvage that though, but just not the drawer bottom itself. Here again, you can see these sections that are just glued together. I'm not going to be reusing any of the nails. They're quite flimsy and rusted, but I am going to be reusing the screws, obviously. Now take note of the color of this evaporist right now. It's kind of a nice golden, a little bit red color. It's going to be almost black when these come out. I really like this stuff. It works really well. Usually just leave it overnight and pull everything out, rinse it off, and you're good to go. So this drawer front is a mess. Obviously there's the broken piece, but there's also all of these other little splits that I need to deal with. Thankfully, when this piece did split, whenever that happened, it was a pretty clean break, so I should be able to glue that up really well. Now, as I'm handling this, I see this writing, and it says July 19th, 1943. Now, I suppose there could be other reasons someone would write a date inside of a piece of furniture, but not likely. So I think that this was probably written by the person who made it back in 1943. I think that's super cool. I still don't know who made it or where it was made or even what its purpose was, but it did have that little brass plaque on the front. It was just a number, so I'm kind of thinking maybe this was military related. But what a cool little piece of history, even if this was somebody's shop project. Now, as I'm doing these repairs, you'll notice I'm using a couple different types of glue. I'm using regular wood glue here. This is, I believe, Type Bond something or other. I'm using this particular glue anywhere I want a permanent fixture, a permanent joint, or a permanent bond. In some of the other joints, I'm going to be using hide glue. Hide glue is reversible. It's going to make it a lot easier to repair down the road if this needs repairs down the road. But in areas like this, I want this to be a strong and permanent bond, so that's why I'm choosing to use regular wood glue. Now for this section of the drawer slide that is broken, I could recreate this piece pretty easily with a table saw. But the way it broke, and also the fact that it actually gets glued to the drawer bottom, I think that I'm going to be able to salvage this. I just need to make sure it's lined up really well. Clamping this is a little bit awkward just because of the way it's shaped. I need to be able to keep it flat, so I have to clamp it down to these two boards here. But I also need to be able to bring those two pieces together. And I'm going to use a clamp here and here to do that. Not the easiest thing, but we got her done. Now this is one of those projects I like to refer to as a whole 9 yards project. And that pretty much means I'm touching every part of this piece. Everything is going to be disassembled, everything is going to be cleaned, sanded, re-glued. So I'm starting here with the drawer pieces. If you guys have been following me for a while, you know some of my pet peeves by now. One of them is when you have a beautiful piece on the outside but no attention shown to the drawers. And another is when the insides or undersides aren't taken care of. So I'm going to be doing it all in this video. Now a couple of the splits on this drawer front were not worth breaking it apart and re-gluing it. I just tried to get as much in there, and you can see I've got a little bit of squeeze out here, so it's going to work. I need to make sure this stays as flat as possible. I've already noticed that the shape of this drawer is a little bit funny, and I guess we'll see once everything's done how that fits in. I'm not sure if it's just the wood having, expanded and contracted so many times over the years that it just kind of moved that drawer face out of whack, but we'll see what we end up with here. But now let's disassemble the rest of this. Pro tip, anytime you're taking something like this apart, especially if it's kind of weird construction, grab a pencil or some painter's tape and a pen and label your pieces so you know exactly where they go. Especially on handmade pieces like this, there's no uniformity from side to side, meaning that this piece will only fit properly in this corner. I'm kind of laughing watching this footage back now because that little driver bit that I have is so short. It's a number 3 Robertson, which is a really big square, and I don't have a long one, or I didn't. It could barely reach the screws in here. I think it was the day after this, I went out and I bought a set of longer driver bits. Now, I've never actually seen a piece put together quite like this. They have a groove. Whoever made this loved splines. So there's a groove in the top section and a groove on the sides and a spline in the middle to just put it all together. But it's all done at a 45-degree angle, so that's pretty neat actually. So just like the drawer front, these pieces are made of small blocks of wood held together with a spline, and they're pretty rough. A lot of the glue has failed. Just like I did with the drawer face, I gotta fix all of those. So the leg assembly is basically just dowels and glue, with the exception, of course, of where it attaches to that top section. Speaking of the top, we got to do some repairs here as well. There's a little bit of a split. It doesn't go all the way across, so I'm just trying to wedge it open, shove as much glue down there as possible, and then I'll be clamping that back up. Again, this is a situation where I prefer to use some form of wood glue rather than hide glue, which I prefer in joints. Now I have to be really careful here because you can see that the bottom of the top here comes down to a point, and I don't want to crush that with this clamp. So I did a light sanding on the back side of this drawer face, and I wanted to make sure I left enough of this date that was written there that I could recreate it. So when they initially signed it, obviously the pen made an imprint in the wood, or an impression in the wood. So even after light sanding, it was still visible, so I basically just retraced it. It's, you know, just one of those things. I didn't have to do that, but I thought it was really cool because most likely it is the date that this was made, and I wanted to save that. There wasn't a whole lot of finish left. What was there, I'm pretty sure, was actually shellac. So I just used a scraper to get the majority of that off, and then I went in with a light sanding. Now, how I sand depends on the piece. In situations like this, I'm not sanding to get every single mark and ding out. This piece has history, I mean, look at it. So if there's a few little scratches and nicks here and there that remain, that's totally fine. I'm honestly more concerned about actual damage, and you can see there's a lot of staining on the top that I'm going to have to address. That's more what I'm worried about. I am going to be hitting this top with some oxalic acid, but to do that I need to get down to the raw wood, so a light sanding here as well. I believe this is 120 or 100, it might be 120 actually. Usually on solid wood pieces like this I'll do 120, only going lower if I have to. On veneer I like to start a little bit higher, like 150 and 180. So there's a few little watermarks here after sanding. You can see there's a bit of a dark stain here. I'm not really sure if that's going to come out or not. Probably not. But I'm going to give it a go with the oxalic acid anyway. And actually you can see here what the natural color of this beautiful courtesan oak would be if I just put a clear coat on it. It's this lovely, warm, golden yellow color. This is what it looks like after the oxalic acid has dried, but I can't just go in and sand that because there's little oxalic acid crystals everywhere, so it needs to be rinsed really, really well. This is an important step of using oxalic acid. You go down to the raw wood, apply the oxalic acid, let it dry, rinse it really well, and then let that dry extremely well, especially if you're putting a finish on something. You always want to make sure you're using gloves, and breathing apparatus doesn't hurt. So here is the perfect example of little marks that I'm not terribly worried about. On a drawer face or vertical surface, I don't really have to worry about these. On the top, however, there were a few marks like that I did fill with a little bit of wood filler because I don't want anything that's being used on the top of this to get into those holes. But it's not as important on things like drawers, the sides of a piece, and they can really add character actually. So you can see here that the oxalic acid did take out some of the staining, not all of it, there's still a few marks. And that sort of circular stain stayed as well, but it did lighten a bit. Remember how light and golden that evaporust liquid was? Yeah, it is black now. But what's nice about it is it can be reused, so I'm just going to use a coffee filter and get rid of any particulate that's kind of in the bottom of it, and pour it back in the jug and use it again. So here I've just done a dry fit. This is after everything is sanded and repaired. This is always a good idea, especially if you've got multiple parts and it's a little bit confusing. Do a dry fit, relabel things if you need to, but it's important to do that before you just go at it with glue, because you get in the middle of a glue up and you realize you've got the wrong leg. It is not a good day. So as I mentioned earlier, here is where I'm switching glues. I'm going to use hide glue, and again, the reason for this is it's just a lot easier to take joints apart down the road if they need repairing. You could use a wood glue here. I've done it in very specific situations, but for the most part, hide glue is the way to go on something like this. It's just going to make any future repairs so much easier. By the way, if you are enjoying this content, please feel free to leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of this project. If you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. You don't have to, I'm not going to force you. But subscribing and making sure that notification bell is turned on is a great way to make sure that you don't miss any upcoming projects. Don't forget to, I do have my other channel, which is Transcend Furniture Gallery Unplugged. I only launched that about a month ago. It's doing really well so far. I think there's 4 or 5 videos there now. And it's basically just a completely different way to view my content. Not everybody watches these videos to learn, some do it just to relax. So while you've got voiceovers and music and it's a little more lively here, the Unplugged channel is basically just shop sounds, so you hear what I hear when I'm working. There's no voiceover, it's very minimal music, and it's just kind of a more relaxing experience. So I didn't want to use full 1/4 inch plywood for the bottom. It's just a little bit too thick, but 1/8 is a little bit too skinny. So I actually bought a sheet of 1/8 inch plywood, but it's not really 1/8 of an inch. It's a little bit less than that. So I glued 2 together, which gave me a much firmer panel, and it's just a little bit under 1/4 of an inch. Now here's the problem. These are all rendered out for the 1/8 inch panel, so I need to redo these to accept the new drawer bottom. Now, a moment of silence for my little makeshift router table that you see me setting up here. This did really well for me for about, I think about 1.5 years I've had it. I don't do a ton of routing, or at least I wasn't doing a ton back when I created it, and I just have a little trim router on the bottom. But it basically just clamps to my work table, and then my fence, in quotations, is this board that's on a screw, so it swivels. And it lets me figure out what measurement I need. I did go out and buy an actual router table, a very inexpensive kind of entry-level one on a stand. Something a little bit of a step up from that, but still nothing quite crazy in terms of expense or size. That's basically how I've built this workshop around me, one piece at a time, and just upgrading when I'm able to. So I'm just kind of laying out what I'm going to do here. You can see these old nail holes. I am going to reuse them, but I'm also going to add some pin nails, which is going to help these pieces stay in place while the glue dries and I can get those couple of nails back in. I'm using hide glue here as well. Nailed joints like this generally don't hold up forever, obviously. It's not as secure as something like a dovetail or other joint. So to be able to take this apart easily without breaking the wood is important. As far as the drawer bottom goes, it's plywood, not solid wood, so I don't have to worry about the drawer bottom expanding and contracting too much. I do a little bit here on this front face, but it's not a very large piece of wood. The movement is going to be minimal. I did use a little bit of hide glue there in that joint, or groove rather, but I didn't use any in the grooves on the side panels or the back, which is going to sit on top and nail in from the bottom. I did use a little bit of hide glue on the sides here that hold the back piece in though. And as you can see, the pins just hold this in place until I can get the nails in without it sliding all around. And then just a few little nails here in the bottom, and we've got a lovely, fresh, and solid drawer. Definitely do not regret my decision to replace this bottom. So time to add the leg assembly back to the main part. Also, these glue blocks that were originally underneath, I'm going to reattach these as well. It's just going to help make this drawer even stronger. Now, as far as this wooden drawer guide goes, it did glue up pretty strong. I can see where the old holes were, and I also added some hide glue to the bottom of it, so it is physically glued to the bottom of the plywood. Then this gets nailed back into its home. I also added a little bit of hide glue just for some extra stability. Okay, now the finish. I'm going to be using some Odie's oil and a safer solvent and some of their pigments to basically make a custom finish. These two pigment colors together create a very warm and beautiful mission oak kind of color, maybe slightly lighter. It just depends how you mix it. I love using these pigments because you're in complete control of the opacity of the stain, the color of the stain, and it smells so good. I don't have to wear a respirator and clean my shop top to bottom every time I use the stuff, unlike lacquer. And I always just sort of eyeball this. You can do exact measurements. If you go to the Odie's Oil Instagram or Facebook page, they've got tons of videos about what ratios to use. I usually just wing it. I've done it enough that I kind of know what I'm going to end up with by this point. To apply it, I'm going to be using a non-woven pad. Sometimes I use these Merkur Milan pads. Doesn't really matter, it's all basically the same thing. Now I love the light color here. The problem is, if you remember when I did the oxalic acid, this isn't the natural color of the wood. A lot of people look at wood like this and say, oh my gosh, you should have just clear coated it. It's so lovely light. Well, it's not going to stay light. This color that I'm applying is actually really close to what the natural color would be. It's just slightly darker. And the reason I'm going slightly darker than the original is to try to camouflage the few little stains that remain. Now I don't actually show it in the video, but after the stain has set for a couple of days, I will go in with another coat of just the Odie's oil, just for a little bit of added protection. Now I use the same stain on the drawer inside and out, so it's all kind of uniform now. And I am loving how this looks. So with Odie's oil, even with the stain pigments, you apply it, you let it sit for a bit, and then you rub it off. And when I say rub it off, you buff all of it off as much as you can. Anything that hasn't really bonded with the wood gets removed. This is a fairly common thing that people using Odie's for the first time run into. They use way too much, use so little, because using a lot, number one, it makes it harder to remove, and number two, it's a waste of money. You only need a little bit and buff it all off completely. Now, of course, me being me, I had to also do the inside and underside. I just prefer to have everything sealed uniformly. Look at this wood grain. Now, again, I am, like I said, going to add another layer of Odie's oil in a couple of days once this has had time to really kind of set. But yeah, this piece is beautiful. So remember that hideous old handle? I need to figure out what I'm doing with this. I need to figure out if I'm going to use it, if I'm going to replace it. It's practically a baseball bat, but it is original to the piece. The holes are already there, so I'm probably going to reuse this. Quick shout out though to anyone who has bought me a tea over the years through the Buy Me a Coffee app. You guys are keeping me fed in tea, and any of the extra money goes towards buying tools and supplies for the shop, so huge thank you. So I'm adding some stripper to this handle. I just wanted to show you the difference between plating and paint. This is a really good stripper, and as you can see, all it's basically doing is cleaning. This is not a spray paint, even though it looks like it's chipping and wearing off in some areas. This is some type of plating, just like they do copper plating, brass plating, silver plating. But this is a solid brass rod, so we're gonna get down to the brass. And the only way for me to do that is sanding. So you can see hand sanding pretty much does nothing. This would take a very long time to get through. So I'm going to pull out the big guns here and grab my surf prep. So because I'm not necessarily looking to make this look brand new, I don't want to go to a high polish. I want more of a brushed brass look. So initially I'm just going to try to get this kind of silvery chrome plating off, get down to the brass, and then I will jump up to a finer grit and then a finer grip from there till I get the look that I want. Once I get close, I'm going to switch to hand sanding, which is going to make all of my scratch patterns in one direction and give it that nice brushed brass. I can never say that. Brushed brass feel. And yeah, I'm super happy with that. Now, if you remember from the beginning, the bolts that initially held this were bent, so I need to get some new machine screws. The trouble is going to be finding ones that are the right size, and it took me a few tries, but I did find 2 that are going to work. Now this little number tag I am going to put back on. I'm not really sure what it's from. Like I said earlier, it might be military, it could be from a school, but I'm just using a tiny bit of Flitz polish to kind of clean this up a bit. I don't necessarily need it to look brand new. I want to leave at least a little bit of tarnish, but definitely want to clean it up. Now the nails that initially held this were so rusted they actually broke off while I was pulling one of them out, so I'm adding some new brass nails. Now initially this hung a little bit crooked. I'm going to try to straighten it up just a little bit while still covering that light area where it was before. Now you guys know me, I'm a perfectionist, so there were things about this piece that bother me initially and bother me still because it's a handmade piece and it's not perfect. The drawer itself is a little bit of a wonky shape. It slides in and out perfectly. The drawer itself is very solid now. It's more so that it just doesn't have that nice, crisp, even gap all the way around. But you know what? I'll get over it. I mean, looking back at what I started with, this piece was really a mess. It was trashed. So all things considered, I'm super happy with how this came out. Make sure you guys let me know down below what you guys think of this project. If you have any ideas of what this piece may have been used for or where it was made, let me know. As always, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the reveal, and I'll see you next time.